Today I am going to discuss about ADO.NET. Okay, so what is ADO.NET? So using ADO.NET, what we can do? So what is the advantages of ADO.NET? We will discuss. Okay, so ADO.NET stands for ActiveX Data Object. ADO.NET stands for ActiveX Data Object. Okay, so ADO.NET is a native driver. ADO.NET is a native driver. So mainly using ADO.NET we can connect to the database. So ADO.NET is used to provide communication from front end to back end application. So that's what, before going to discuss about ADO.NET, you need to know the few terms. Okay, that terms called, first one is front end application, second one is back end application, third one front end tool, fourth one back end tool. Okay, these are the few terms you have to know before about ADO.NET. Front end application, back end application, front end tool and back end tool. Front end application means the application which will be interact with screens, forms, web pages, reports. These are all our front end application. Back end application means the application where we can store end user information or client information, that is called back end application. You know, front end application means our .NET web pages or window forms, like that. Back end application means SQL Server database. We can design the database in that. Okay, and front end tool and back end tool. Front end tool means the tool or software which is used to develop front end application is known as front end tool. For example, Visual Studio is a front end tool in .NET. If we take Java, NetBeans is a front end. Okay, so Eclipse is a front end. So many front end tools are there. Back end tool means the tool or software which is used to develop back end application is known as back end tool. Back end tool is nothing but SQL Server Management Studio. Okay, this is called back end tool because using the tool only we can able to design back end application like that. Okay, right. So why I am discussing here front end and back end, these using ADO.NET. ADO.NET is a native driver. Using ADO.NET we can communicate from front end to back end application. Okay, in reality compulsory each and every website should maintain some database. They should interact with the database compulsory. So we should connect the data in database and we will get the information from the database. We will transfer the information to the database. These communication should be done in, especially in .NET applications, using ADO.NET. So without ADO.NET we cannot write a database connectivity program. Okay, we cannot write a database connectivity code. This is the main important of ADO.NET. So ADO.NET is used to connect to database, or it is provide to communication or interact with the database is possible. Okay, right. So ADO.NET is what? Native driver we can say. Okay, right. So here in ADO.NET especially we need to discuss layered approach. Okay, we need to discuss layered approach. So there are three layered approaches are there in ADO.NET. So first layered approach, second layered approach and third layered approach. In that what layered approach we have to follow, then let's see that. Okay, right. First I am going to talk about first layered approach here. First layered approach. In this first layered approach, front end and back end applications are present in same mission. Front end and back end applications are present in same mission. This is mission 1. Here it is front end application. here it is back-end application, both are communicating with each other. Okay, this is the layered approach, first layered approach. In this first layered, front-end application, back-end applications are present in same mission. What is the drawback in this layered approach? Front-end and back-end applications are present in same mission, so they communicate with each other, no translatory mediums are required. Okay, and layered approach cannot support a centralized database. That means what? Centrally located database. With the database, many clients can be interact. That is called centrally located database. But here it is backend application. This is database purpose. Here with this backend application, no other clients can interact. So only this client only can interact. This front end application only can interact. So it will not support centralized database. Okay. So, and we cannot store large amount of data into this database only. So this is the drawback of first layered approach. To overcome this drawback, we will go for second layered approach. Here I am giving second layered approach. Second layered approach. In this second layered approach, front-end application and back-end applications are present in two different missions. Front-end application and back-end application in two different missions. Here it is mission 1. Here it is mission 2. Here front-end application, back-end application. Here native driver, here also native driver. So here native drivers are going to interact with each other. The front end application means .NET and Java, for example, and the front end native driver is back end native driver is back-end application is SQL and Oracle. So these are front-end application and back-end application. Here front-end native driver and back-end native driver. In this layered approach, front-end and back-end can be present in two different missions. This is mission 1 and this is mission 2. Okay. So here front-end and back-end are present in two different missions. So in this layered approach, it supports centralized database. That means database is separate mission. With this database, any clients can be interact with this, and we can store large amount of data also. Here it is possible. So this is the very useful layered approach here. Okay. So here what is the role of native drivers here in this layered approach? Okay. So in this layered approach, front end application and back end application cannot interact directly with each other. Rather, they interacted through native drivers. Here front-end native driver is there, that is ADO.NET. Back-end native driver is there, that is SQL native client if we use SQL Server database. Okay. So front-end, whenever sending request to back-end application, that request directly will not go to back-end application. Rather, it goes to where? This request goes to front-end native driver. This native driver take that request, and this request is converted into backend native driver understandable format and sends to backend native driver. So backend native driver will send request to the backend application. Same vice versa, response also will be happen like this only. Backend application will send response to front end application, but it will not go directly response to front end application. Meanwhile, it will go to where? Backend native driver. This backend native driver will take that response and it will convert into front-end native driver understandable format, and front-end native driver will send response to front-end application. Okay. So these both are going to be communicate. The role of native drivers are to communicate with each other. Front-end and back-end application will not communicate with each other directly. They interacted with what? Through native driver. So what is the drawback of this layered approach? Okay, so I am telling here, so using this layered approach, it can be support centralized database. Once the database is present here in backend application, many clients can be interact with this database, and whatever they want they can access here. Okay, centralized database is possible, and we can store large amount of information also in this database application. Okay, it is possible. Then what is the drawback? Yes, so what is the drawback means, if front end application is having this native driver, particular native driver, okay, that native driver is only suitable for particular backend application. For example, let us consider, so this is a front end application. Okay, front end application, this front end application is contain native driver, that is ND1. So native driver 1, this native driver 1 is used for interacting with what database? For example, SQL database. So this native driver is reserved for SQL server database only. Okay, so this is only reserved for SQL server database. But here this front end application, this is having native driver 1. Okay, but it is having interaction with what? SQL server. But if you use Oracle database, then this is not going to be support here. Okay, because this native driver 1 already reserved with SQL server. Again, front end should maintain what? Native driver 2, like this. So different set of native driver should maintain front end. Same like backend application also. Okay, for example, backend application is there. For example, backend application is, that is SQL server. This SQL is maintaining one set of native drivers, that is ND1. It is used to interact with what application? .NET application. But this native driver is reserved for .NET application. For example, here Java application is their front end. Again, this backend should maintain what? Separate native driver, that is ND2. So this is the problem here. Okay, so what is the problem? Whenever front end application wants to interact with different databases, then front end application compulsory should maintain different set of native drivers. And whenever backend application wants to interact with particular front end application, and backend application also should maintain different native drivers, okay, for interacting with different front end application. So this is the problem with this two-layered approach. Okay, so that is what, to overcome this drawback, we use third layered approach. So how it will be, three-layered approach, how it will be, now we will discuss. No front end application, no backend application should maintain set of native drivers, because native drivers, they are not interact with each other, they are interacting with through middleware here. Now let me talk about three-layered approach. Here it is three-layered approach. Here it is third-layered approach. Third layer approach. Okay, this is third layered approach. Now here front end application as usual. Here front end native driver, it is ADO.NET, and here in the middleware is there. Here you can see this is middleware, and here backend application, backend native driver, here native driver, here backend application. So what is happening here? Front end and backend cannot be interact with each other directly, and native drivers also cannot be interact with each other directly. Middlewares are there. So what is the middleware here? These are the data providers like SQL client is, and Oracle client, one data provider. Then JDBC, Java database connectivity, ODBC, open database connectivity, OLEDB, object link embed database. These are the data providers here. If you use data providers, we can able to communicate with anything here. Okay, so if you maintain set of native drivers, backend application and front end application need not to maintain set of native drivers when they want to interact with different front end applications, or when they want to interact with different backend application. Set of native drivers are not required, one native driver is enough. Okay, because native drivers are not going to interact with each other, they interact through middleware like data providers here. Okay, this is the third layered approach. Okay, right. So this is the layered approach in ADO.NET. Now we will discuss, so the mainly ADO.NET is provide two types of architectures. ADO.NET provide how many types of architectures? 2 types of architectures ADO.NET will provide. So what are the 2 types of architectures that are? First one is connection oriented architecture. First one is connection oriented architecture. Second one is disconnection oriented architecture. Connection oriented architecture and disconnection oriented architecture. ADO.NET will provide mainly 2 types of architectures, connection oriented and disconnection oriented. So connection oriented means whenever programmer wants to interact with the database, compulsory connection should open. Whenever programmer has finished their task with the database, some operation has completed database, you should only close the connection. That means as a programmer you should open connection and you should close the connection. Okay, that is called what architecture? Connection oriented architecture. Disconnection oriented architecture means what? Whenever we send request to the server or database, automatically connection is open. Whenever we get response from the database, automatically connection is closed. So this is called disconnection oriented architecture. In this disconnection oriented architecture, you need not to open connection, you need not to close connection. In connection oriented architecture, compulsory you should open connection, and after finishing your task from the database, you should compulsory close the connection. This is okay, right? Connection oriented architecture and disconnection. And connection oriented architecture is having 2 methods, that is method 1 and method 2. Method 1 and method 2. Connection oriented architecture is having how many methods? 2 methods. Whenever we use any one of the method, you should compulsory open connection and you should compulsory close connection. Okay, that should be done. So this method 1, so actually this method 1 is used to do the operations into database. Method 1 is used to do operations into database. Okay, this is client and here it is server. You can consider this is database. In this method, first step, client will send request to the server. Request means opening connection. After sending request, second step, he will perform required operations. And after completion of performing required operation, simply he will close the connection. This is what method 1. You know, method 1 of connection oriented architecture, what is the use of method 1? Method 1 is used to perform required operations onto the database, like if you want to insert the data, or if you want to delete the data, or if you want to update the data, then we can use what method? Method 1. So in this method, client will send request to the server for required operation to do. He will perform required operation whatever he wants to do, like inserting, updating, deleting. After completion of his task, he should close the what? Connection compulsory. This is what method of connection oriented architecture. Using method 1 only we can do the operations like insert, delete, update the data into database. You strictly remember, using method 1 we cannot read the data from database. Okay, if you want to read the data from database, you can use method 2 of connection oriented architecture. So using method 2 we can read the data from database, we cannot perform operations like insert, delete, update the data into database. This scenario is different. This is for transferring the data into database, this is for getting the data from database. Okay, so method 2 I am going to explain. This method 2 is client. Okay, here it is client and here it is server. Client and server. This is database. Here what I mean to say, result set here, result set or network buffer we can say. In this method 2, client will send request to the server for required data to read. I want to read here. For required data to read purpose, client is sending request. Client request is process here. In second step, client request is process. After completion of process, client requested data is dumped into result set or network buffer also we can call. Once the client requested data is present in result set, link is established to the client. In third, once link is establishing to the client, read the data from set. After, client simply will close the connection because it is oriented architecture again. Okay, so this is connection oriented architecture method 2. Method 2 is for what purpose? To read the data from database. Method 1 is used for what purpose? To transfer the data into database. Like if you want to do the operations, we can use method 1, insert, delete, update. Or you want to get the data from database, or you want to read the data from database, you can use method 2. These two methods are going to work with what? Connection oriented. So compulsory, whenever you want to interact with the database, you should open connection. Whenever you get the data from database, after completion of that, you should close the connection whenever you finish tasks from the database. So method 2 scenario is what? Client will send request to the server for required data to read. Client request will be processed at server side. After completion of process, client requested data is dumped into where? Result set. It is a memory which is allotted for the client at server side. Once the data is present in result set, the link will be established to the client. Once the link is established to the client, client starts read the data from where? Result set. After completion of reading, client should close the connection. So this is what connection oriented architecture method 2. It is just for reading the data from database. It is just for doing operations into database like insert, delete, update. Whenever you use method 1 and method 2 of connection oriented architecture, compulsory you should open connection and compulsory you should close the connection. Okay, right. Now let me talk about disconnection oriented architecture. Disconnection oriented architecture means what? Whenever you want to interact with the database, you need not to open connection. That means when you request to the server, automatically connection is going to be open. Whenever you get the response from the server, automatically connection will be closed. So that is what disconnection oriented architecture. You need not to open connection and you need not to close connection. Let me look the scenario of disconnection oriented architecture. For example, you can see this is that client. Okay. Here it is client and here it is process area. Process area. And client will send request to the server as usual. Client will send request to the server. Client request will go to and client request will be processed at server. After completion of process, client requested data is dumped into process area, and after that client will start read the data from process area. Now what is the main difference between connection oriented architecture and disconnection oriented architecture means? Here you should not open connection and close the connection. Whenever you send request to the server, connection is open automatically. Whenever you get response from the server, connection is closed automatically. So client will send request to the server for reading the data or writing the data, whatever it is, and client request will be processed at server side. Once process is completed, requested data is dumped into client machine only, that is called process area. Here it is process area. Once the data is present in process area, link is going to be disconnected. Okay, there is no need to work with database. So client will always read the data from where? Process area. What is the advantage if you know this process area is present in client machine? Once the client requested data is present in process area, anytime they can interact with process area. You need not to go and every time to collect the data from server. So here one time request will happen. Every time, one time only you are getting entire the data what you want, and you can place your data in your mission only. So if the data is present in our mission, client mission, then why we need to interact with always server? Okay, it is a very advantage actually. But this advantage is whenever you immediate updation is not required, then later if you decided to update back the data to the database, then you can use disconnection oriented architecture method. Otherwise, immediate updation is compulsory required. Like if you are just reading and transferring the data back to the database, then you can go for connection oriented architecture method too. Okay, which one is better to you as per your requirement, you can follow. But here request here only one time. Client request is processed and processed data is present in process area. Once the data is present in process area, there is no prior connection to maintain to the database. Then client always interact with this process area, whatever they want to do, these operations and all they can do, and immediately one time it will be updated back to the database. This is called disconnection oriented architecture. Okay, so this connection oriented architecture and disconnection oriented architecture, so we will with a clear picture with programmatic representation how to interact with database and all. But you can strictly remember in ADO.NET, whenever you want to do these all operations or whenever you want to interact with the database compulsory, then you have to use some objects, ADO.NET objects and classes. Okay, without that objects and classes we cannot do anything in database. So that all ADO.NET objects and classes are present in this namespace, system.data.sql client namespace. Why SQL client? You know, I am going to interact with SQL server, so that's what compulsory this namespace is required, system.data.sql client. But if you interact with Oracle, then system.data.oracle. Without this namespace, ADO.NET classes and not present here. Okay, so you want to connect with the database, so here I am giving some objects names, object. So whenever you want to interact with the database, so we have to use object name and class name. Objects and classes are present in system.data.sql client. So this namespace is compulsory, system.data.sql client. Why? Because whenever I am going to interact with SQL server, you can use SQL client, or if you are interacting with Oracle database, Oracle required. So here I am giving object name and class name. Here object name and class name. Object name is, for example, connection object. Okay, let me give that. Object name is connection, class name is SQL connection. Okay, object name is command, class name is SQL command. Object name is parameter, class name is SQL parameter. Object name is data reader, class name is SQL data reader. Object name is data adapter, class name is SQL data adapter. Object name is data set, class name also data set. These are the main important objects and classes. Using these objects and classes, we are going to connect with the database and we are going to do the operations into database. Without these objects and classes, we cannot do anything. All classes are present in where? System.data.sql client. If you are not including system.data.sql client namespace, these classes are not going to become. Okay, so these are all present in this namespace. So connection means if you want to connect to database, you can use connection object. Command means after connecting, you want to do some operations like insert, delete, update, we can use command. Or through parameters you want to work with, you can use parameters. Data reader means it is reverse. So you can read the data from database. Whenever you want to read the data from database, already data is present in database, then you can use reader. And this connection command parameter, data reader are work with what architecture? Connection oriented architecture. But data and data set, both purpose we can use. Either we can store the data into database, either we can read the data from database. These are work with what architecture? Disconnection oriented architecture. Okay, these are. So all these we will see practical implementation, each and everything one by one, how to connect with the database, how to command, how to give the parameter, and how to read the data from database. Everything we will discuss in later sessions.